Though she is still only a child, Princess Charlotte is already at the center of what may become one of the most extraordinary jewelry collections of her generation. For now, her jewelry box is expectedly modest, yet we've already witnessed its beginning, marked by pieces of deep family significance. Looking at Charlotte today, it's impossible not to wonder, what lies ahead? Which jewelry masterpieces will she reveal as she steps into her royal role? What will be her debut tiara? And what will she truly inherit from the legendary collections of the women who came before her? We often imagine her draped in the dazzling jewels of her late grandmother, Princess Diana, or her mother, Catherine. But here is the spoiler. Her most anticipated inheritance is likely not the famous tiara you're thinking of. What can Catherine actually pass down to her daughter? And why the right to wear a jewel is very different from the right to own it. To make sense of these complex rules, I've envisioned Charlotte's future as 3 distinct jewelry boxes. I invite you to explore them together with me. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. The first historic jewel that Princess Charlotte wore in public was small enough to rest in the palm of a hand. At Queen Elizabeth II's funeral in September 2022, the 7-year-old princess wore a diamond horseshoe brooch. Its history went back further than the great-grandmother from whom Charlotte reportedly received it. According to reports, Elizabeth II had given the jewel to Charlotte, and it had previously belonged to the Queen's mother, Queen Elizabeth, later known as the Queen Mother. A photograph from 1929 shows the then Duchess of York wearing it. Nearly a century later, her great-great-granddaughter wore the same little horseshoe again at Trooping the Color in June 2025. That gives us a rare line through 3 generations of royal women. The Queen Mother owned and wore the brooch. Elizabeth II reportedly gave it to Charlotte, and Charlotte has now worn it twice. The horseshoe is the strongest evidence that Charlotte's own historical collection may already have begun. Most of her other jewelry belongs to a different world. At Wimbledon in 2024, she wore 2 pale pink and blue thread bracelets. That November, William told a more personal story. Charlotte had made him a friendship bracelet bearing the word Papa after the family attended a Taylor Swift concert. He took it to South Africa and promised not to lose it. By Wimbledon in 2025, her choices evolved slightly. She wore a silver Pandora snake chain bracelet, where eagle-eyed watchers spotted a green eternity circle charm, perfectly corresponding to her May birthstone, alongside a white heart and a little rose gold figure of Nala from The Lion King. At Trooping the Color in 2026, Catherine wore a 3-strand Nigel Milne pearl bracelet that had belonged to Diana. Charlotte wore her own 3-strand bracelet in a similar style. It was a beautiful, elegant mother-daughter moment. A month later at Wimbledon, she chose another modern bracelet with small seaside charms. Several publications immediately compared its look to a gold charm bracelet once owned by Princess Diana. Seeing these century-old diamonds worn alongside modern silver charms, colorful strings, and elegant pearls creates a wonderful, grounded contrast. Princess Charlotte's jewelry story has undeniably begun, blending the weight of history with the lightness of youth. Yet, looking at this charming, growing collection, it is simply impossible not to ask, what awaits us next? When the time finally comes, which tiara will Princess Charlotte wear for her grand debut? Whenever the conversation turns to Princess Charlotte's future jewelry, there is one specific, glittering piece that almost everyone immediately names. It takes us right back to a summer day in 1981, looking at a young Princess Diana walking down the aisle in a spectacular arrangement of diamonds. The Spencer tiara, with its beautiful running scrolls, stars, and tubular flowers, is forever etched into our collective memory. It feels like the most natural, emotionally resonant prediction that Charlotte will one day wear the very same diamonds to honor the grandmother she never met. But here is the gentle reality check that we have to make. Despite its deep association with Diana, the Spencer tiara is not a royal piece at all, nor was it ever Princess Diana's personal property. It is, strictly speaking, a Spencer family heirloom. Throughout her royal life, Diana simply borrowed it for her appearances, first from her father and later from her brother. Today, the tiara remains safely with the current head of the family, Charles, the 9th Earl Spencer. Specialized sources expect it to eventually pass to his son, Viscount Althorp, along with the family estate. Princess Charlotte, of course, does not sit in the natural line of inheritance for the Earl Spencer. I know it might feel a little disappointing to hear, as seeing her in those delicate stars and flowers would be such a poetic visual tribute. Now, could the Spencer family theoretically offer it to Charlotte as a loan for a highly special occasion in the future? Absolutely, it is a beautiful possibility, but it would require a specific, private decision from the Spencers. So, how exactly does a young royal build her own private collection? To truly understand how a young princess acquires her jewels, we need to step back into a completely different era of the British monarchy. We have to look at the youth of Queen Elizabeth II, Princess Margaret, and Princess Anne. During those decades, a royal milestone was celebrated with breathtaking, permanent additions to a princess's private collection. When the future Queen Elizabeth turned 18 in 1944, her father, King George VI, presented her with a magnificent Cartier sapphire and diamond bracelet. By the time of her wedding in 1947, the gifts reached an entirely new level. Her grandmother, Queen Mary, gifted her the famous Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. The Nizam of Hyderabad went even further. He instructed Cartier in London to allow the young princess to choose whatever she desired for her wedding gift. She selected an intricate platinum necklace set with approximately 300 diamonds. For her 21st birthday, the government and Union of South Africa gave her a necklace originally containing 21 diamonds. In 1952, the necklace was shortened, and 6 of the removed stones were used to make a bracelet. It is almost staggering when you pause to consider the sheer volume of world-class, historically significant diamonds being handed over as personal property to a young woman barely in her 20s. These magnificent gifts marked Elizabeth's entry into adulthood, marriage, and public life in a way we are highly unlikely to see repeated today. Modern royal policy now strictly distinguishes official gifts from personal ones, meaning a jewel received because of a royal role is no longer considered private property and cannot simply be sold or exchanged. This tradition of lavish personal gifting continued smoothly with Princess Anne. Her private collection includes Princess Andrew's Meander tiara, a striking family piece that was given to her by Queen Elizabeth II, and which Anne later lovingly lent to her daughter Zara for her 2011 wedding. For her own wedding in 1973, Anne reportedly received the Cartier Aquamarine Pineflower tiara from the Queen Mother. But perhaps most remarkably, she even received a tiara from a corporate entity. After christening a ship for the Worldwide Shipping Group in May 1973, she was presented with the Diamond Festoon tiara. Now, receiving such magnificent gifts sounds like an absolute dream, but there is a very practical and sometimes heartbreaking side to personal ownership. When a jewel is truly your private property, it means you can eventually pass it on, sell it, or see it leave the royal family entirely. No piece illustrates this risk better than the Poltimore tiara. Originally made by Gerard around 1870, this towering diamond masterpiece was actually purchased by Princess Margaret herself at a public auction in January 1959 for £5,500. Because of its brilliant, convertible design, she often wore it as a spectacular fringe necklace before her engagement, and then famously as her bridal tiara in 1960. Because it was her private property, its ultimate fate rested entirely with her heirs. After Margaret's passing, her children included the Poltimore in a highly anticipated Christie's auction in 2006, where it sold for a staggering £926,400. I always feel a profound sense of melancholy thinking about this moment. There is such a sharp, jarring contrast between the romantic, glittering splendor of a royal wedding day and the cold, definitive strike of an auctioneer's hammer. Because it was privately owned, a defining piece of mid-century royal history slipped away from the royal circle forever. Looking at the fate of the Poltimore tiara, it becomes entirely clear why the modern approach of the Wales family has changed so radically. Now place Catherine's wedding portrait beside these earlier examples. On that spectacular April morning, Catherine walked down the aisle wearing the breathtaking Cartier Halo tiara. The sparkler on her head belonged to Elizabeth II and was explicitly lent to the bride. Catherine's diamond earrings, however, were a personal wedding gift from her parents. Robinson Pelham designed them as stylized oak leaves, each with a pear-shaped diamond drop and a pave-set acorn. The design referred to the newly created Middleton family coat of arms and was made to complement the tiara. That single image shows the two systems that may shape Charlotte's future. The historic tiara was borrowed for one day. The quieter earrings became Catherine's property. If they eventually pass from mother to daughter, they will be a more literal inheritance than any grand tiara Catherine has worn at a state banquet. This is why asking only which royal tiara Charlotte will receive can be misleading. A princess may have access to diamonds of immense historical value while owning very few of them. Conversely, a small family gift may be hers to keep, alter, and one day leave to someone else. So, when exactly might we see Princess Charlotte in her first tiara? This question is often answered with one neat statement. British princesses cannot wear tiaras until they turn 18. 18 was certainly an important traditional threshold when a young princess might begin attending formal evening occasions and receiving significant jewels of her own. But the historical record does not support treating it as an absolute rule, or as a birthday on which a tiara automatically appears. Princess Anne provides the clearest exception. On October 31, 1967, she attended the state opening of Parliament wearing the Cartier Halo tiara. It was her first documented public tiara appearance, and she was only 17. Her example does not make the tradition meaningless. It simply shows that the occasion and the princess's public role could matter more than the precise date of her 18th birthday. Princess Margaret followed the more familiar pattern, making her tiara debut at 18 during the celebrations surrounding Queen Juliana's inauguration in Amsterdam in 1948. Princess Elizabeth's experience was different again. She received the Cartier Halo for her 18th birthday in April 1944, while Britain was still at war, but she did not wear it publicly. Her first public tiara appearance came 3 years later, on her wedding day in 1947, when she borrowed Queen Mary's fringe tiara. Wearing a tiara is therefore less about reaching a particular age than about the occasion itself and the public role of the woman attending it. For Princess Charlotte, this leaves two realistic possibilities. If she begins carrying out official duties while still young, a state banquet or another formal diplomatic occasion could bring her tiara debut in her late teens. If her public role develops later, or if she simply has no reason to attend such events during those years, her first tiara appearance might be postponed until her wedding day, just as Princess Elizabeth's was. I often catch myself wondering what kind of royal life Charlotte will eventually have. Will she become a working member of the family, regularly attending state banquets and representing the monarchy abroad? Or will she build a more private and independent life, appearing only at selected family occasions? That question will influence not only when she first wears a tiara, but also what kind of access she may have to the royal jewelry collection in the decades ahead. We cannot predict the date or the occasion, but we can look inside the royal collection and ask which tiaras might realistically be available when that moment finally comes. If we carefully examine the royal collection to find the most logical, beautifully suited candidate for Princess Charlotte's debut, one specific masterpiece immediately steps into the light. It is a tiara that has practically made a royal career out of starting the jewelry stories of young princesses. I am speaking, of course, about the Cartier Halo. Let's trace the fascinating chain of women connected by this single platinum creation. It was made in the London workshops of Cartier, known as English artworks, featuring elegant wave-like scroll and palmette motifs. In November 1936, the Duke of York purchased it for his wife, just weeks before the abdication of Edward VIII changed their lives and the course of British history forever. But its true legacy as a starter tiara began in April 1944. The Queen gently passed it on to her eldest daughter, Princess Elizabeth, as an 18th birthday present. In a rather sweet historical detail, the young princess even wrote a letter to Queen Mary, proudly referring to the gift as a small diamond tiara of my own. And while Elizabeth II did not wear the halo publicly herself, she established a remarkable tradition of offering it to the young women of her family. Princess Margaret wore it in her youth, including at the 1953 coronation. And as we already know, it was precisely this tiara that graced the head of 17-year-old Princess Anne when she made her sparkling debut in 1967. After those mid-century appearances, the Cartier Halo quietly retreated into the royal vaults. It rested in the shadows for decades, completely unseen by the public, until it spectacularly re-emerged to captivate the world on April 29, 2011, for the wedding of Catherine and William. Since that unforgettable spring morning, no member of the royal family has worn it publicly. It has once again slipped behind the heavy vault doors. I must confess, I find a deeply mesmerizing poetry in the thought of Charlotte eventually choosing this specific piece. It is a breathtaking possibility. The Cartier Halo has already proven to be an absolutely flawless starter tiara for the young women of the royal family, beautifully worn by both Princess Margaret and Princess Anne in their youth. With its neat, delicate design and low, comfortable profile, it feels as though it was exclusively created to gracefully complement a young princess. It is the diadem that framed her mother's face on the day she married the future king. Now, resting in silence since 2011, it almost feels as if the tiara is softly biding its time, waiting in the dark for a new, brilliant chapter to begin. Whether Charlotte wears it for her first state banquet or waits until her own wedding day, it would offer a flawless visual bridge between her grandmother's generation, her mother's wedding, and her own modern royal future. It would be an absolutely perfect, emotionally resonant choice, wouldn't it? But what if I told you there is another tiara, one that is far more mysterious, and whose sudden return to the light would cause an absolute sensation? Queen Mary's sapphire sunray bandeau has almost everything one might choose for a young princess. It is low, flexible, and visually distinctive without being overwhelming. Diamonds spread out in a radiating pattern around a sapphire cluster, giving the design its sunray name. The central sapphire element, surrounded by diamonds, can be detached and worn as a brooch. Queen Mary was the first royal woman known to have been photographed in it. The writer Leslie Field linked the bandeau to the Dowager Empress Marie Fyodorovna of Russia, but supplied no source, and no public record documents the transfer. The Russian provenance remains a possibility rather than a fact. Field also wrote that Queen Mary left the bandeau to the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother was not photographed wearing it, but Princess Margaret used it frequently before and after her marriage. She took it on her Caribbean tour in 1958 and wore it to a dinner at Government House in Trinidad. She also took full advantage of the tiara's clever design, frequently detaching that striking central sapphire cluster and wearing it separately as an elegant brooch. Then the public trail stops. Its present location is unknown, and the uncertainty divides the story into two plausible paths. If the Queen Mother retained ownership while allowing Margaret to wear it, the bandeau may have passed to Elizabeth II after the Queen Mother's death in 2002. In that case, it could now be under the control of the present monarch. If it became Margaret's personal property, it may have passed to her children. The bandeau did not appear in the Christie's sale of Margaret's jewels in 2006. This proves only that it was not sold there, not that it returned to the Queen or remained with Margaret's family. The idea of this forgotten sapphire bandeau suddenly appearing on Princess Charlotte is thrilling precisely because of this long, unresolved mystery. The lotus flower tiara is no mystery. It remains in active royal use, and that makes it a realistic candidate for Charlotte one day. The jewel was created in 1923 for the future Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, using a meander and festoon necklace that George VI had given her for their wedding. Its diamonds and pearls were transformed into the low, pointed tiara seen today. Princess Margaret later wore it often. In the present generation, it became strongly associated with Catherine, who wore it at the diplomatic reception in 2013, the Chinese state banquet in 2015, and another diplomatic reception in 2022. At the Japanese state banquet on the 25th of June, 2024, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, wore the lotus flower for the first time. Her jewels were described to the press as pieces from the royal vault lent by Queen Camilla. This appearance showed us something very important. The tiara is not reserved exclusively for Catherine and can perfectly well be assigned to another royal woman. If Charlotte becomes a working royal, the lotus flower would be a practical loan. Its scale is manageable, its shape youthful, and it demonstrably moves between wearers. Yet that same movement makes it less persuasive as Charlotte's personal signature. It has already had long and visible associations with the Queen Mother, Margaret, and Catherine, and it has now entered Sophie's rotation. Charlotte might wear it beautifully without anyone concluding that it had become her tiara. Perhaps that distinction will matter less in her generation. A smaller monarchy may treat tiaras as a shared working collection, assigned according to occasion rather than attached for decades to one woman. In that system, the lotus flower would be a very sensible first loan. When we talk about Princess Charlotte's future jewelry, we often limit our imagination to what is already sitting in the legendary British royal vaults. But there is another very modern, very practical question we should ask. Couldn't William and Catherine simply purchase a personal tiara for their daughter? If that sounds a bit unusual for a modern monarchy, let me take you on a quick journey across the English Channel, because this is exactly what is happening in other European royal families right now. Just a few weeks ago, on June 23, 2026, 18-year-old Princess Eleanor of Belgium made her dazzling tiara debut at a state banquet in Laeken, held in honor of the Emperor and Empress of Japan. She wore a beautiful, delicate piece by the jewelry firm Koosmans, featuring rose-cut diamonds set in silver and gold. But the absolute most fascinating part of this story isn't the design, it is how the tiara entered her life. This was not an ancient Belgian state heirloom pulled from a dusty vault. It was a personal 18th birthday gift from her parents, who quietly acquired it at the Il Ponte auction in Milan in November 2019 for exactly €26,000. That is what it costs to give a modern princess a piece of history she can truly, legally call her own. Meanwhile, in Denmark, we recently saw a completely different approach. On April 21, 2025, Queen Margrethe presented Princess Isabella with her own spectacular 18th birthday gift. She opened her private family collection and gifted Isabella a late 19th century turquoise and diamond bandeau that once belonged to Crown Princess Margaretha of Sweden. But here is where the British royal reality hits a fascinating roadblock. Queen Margrethe could permanently gift this tiara to her granddaughter because it was her personal property. William and Catherine simply do not have this option. They cannot just walk into the Buckingham Palace vaults, pick a beautiful diamond tiara, and permanently give it to Charlotte, because those historic pieces belong to the crown, not to them. And since Catherine does not legally own a private tiara of her own, she cannot pass one down either. This means the Danish path is essentially closed to them. That leaves only the Belgian model, buying a new tiara at auction. But will the Prince and Princess of Wales choose to do that? If we look at their consistent public behavior, we can make a very soft but realistic observation. King Charles III has been very clear about maintaining a more streamlined, economically mindful monarchy. William and Catherine have always fully supported this highly restrained approach to royal spending. Knowing this, I find it incredibly hard to imagine them sending an agent to a Milanese auction house to buy a new tiara. It simply doesn't align with their philosophy. Why spend tens of thousands on a new private acquisition when your daughter will eventually have access to the greatest, most historically significant jewelry collection in the world? They don't need to buy history. They are already surrounded by it. But this brings us to the ultimate, unavoidable dilemma of our story. What will Princess Charlotte actually inherit? What will truly, undeniably belong to her? To make sense of all these complex royal rules and shifting traditions, I like to visualize Princess Charlotte's future jewelry collection not as one giant, overwhelming vault, but as three distinct, entirely separate jewelry boxes. Let's gently open the first one together. Think back to the very beginning of our conversation, When we looked at that tiny, sparkling diamond horseshoe brooch and those colorful string bracelets, those pieces sit in this first box, which represents her true, legal personal property. This is where you will find the gifts she receives directly, her own future private purchases, and the everyday charms she wears to Wimbledon. And one day, this is the box that might hold the most sentimental inheritance of all, Catherine's diamond oak leaf wedding earrings. It may not be the largest or most expensive collection, but it is undeniably, exclusively hers. The second box represents her family heritage. This is the jewelry that will eventually pass through the legal channels of her father, Prince William. It is in this specific box that we might, just might, see some of Princess Diana's famous pieces. Perhaps the Collingwood pearl drop earrings, or the classic sapphire clusters. But, as we discussed, they will only enter Charlotte's box if their current owners make the deliberate, legal decision to transfer them to her. We cannot guarantee exactly what will end up in this second box, but it carries the heavy, beautiful emotional weight of her family's history. But if we stop at these two boxes, it feels like something crucial is missing, doesn't it? Can we really call it a royal inheritance if the grandest, most breathtaking historic diamonds are nowhere to be seen? This brings us to the third and absolutely most magnificent box, but there is a vital catch. Charlotte will never actually own the key to this one. The monarch does. This third box is the Great Royal Access, the official royal collection. It holds the staggering state necklaces, the monumental brooches, and of course, the historic tiaras like the Cartier Halo and the Lotus flower. Under the royal household's gifts policy, official gifts received in connection with royal duties are not the recipient's private property. The crown jewels are governed separately. They are held by the sovereign on behalf of the nation and must pass to the next monarch. You cannot sell them, you cannot exchange them, and you certainly cannot send them to a public auction house, as Princess Margaret's heirs did with the spectacular Poltimore tiara. They are held in trust by the sovereign for the successors and the nation. If Princess Charlotte steps into the role of a working senior royal, she will be granted access to this breathtaking third box. We will see her on state banquet balconies and at diplomatic receptions, shimmering in diamonds of incalculable value. But she will not own a single one of those historic stones. I find this to be a profoundly beautiful, almost philosophical shift in how the modern monarchy operates. When we look back at the young princess wearing that tiny diamond horseshoe brooch, we are actually looking at the very future of the British monarchy. Princess Charlotte's generation will experience royal life quite differently from the queens and princesses who came before her. There will be far less personal accumulation of staggering wealth and much more careful, respectful stewardship of a shared historical heritage. She certainly will not be a princess without jewels. However, her relationship with these breathtaking masterpieces will be defined by the profound privilege to wear them, rather than the absolute right to own them. In many ways, I find this to be a beautifully wise and grounded evolution of the modern monarchy. And now, as we finish our imaginary cup of tea, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. Which tiara do you secretly hope to see Princess Charlotte choose for her grand debut? But let's not limit our imagination just to tiaras. What other royal treasures, perhaps a specific historical necklace, a magnificent diamond bracelet, or a pair of famous pearl earrings, would you most love to see her wear in the future? And do you feel that the right to touch such immense history is an inheritance even greater than owning the stones themselves? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I always read them with such enormous pleasure. If you found this journey through royal destinies and diamonds as captivating as I did, please support this video with a like and subscribe to the channel. Because in the end, the jewels themselves may be silent, but their stories are not. They will never fall silent as long as we continue to tell them. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you very soon.